What's up, guys? This is Dempster, the one and only, coming at you live and in living color. And right now, you are listening to the movie Raid.
It's time for the movie Raid, and tonight's victim is actor Jimmy Dempster, that has played in Box, Fury, One Night of Fear, amongst others. Hello.
Hey, what's up, brother? Good to finally chat with you, man.
Oh, definitely, man. So what have we been up to lately, or are we still getting Box and Fury out there right now?
Yeah, Fury, actually, I just spoke to the director not long ago, and that looks like it's going to get a release pretty soon, man. I think they're going theatrical with that one. I think they're going to get a release probably within the next couple of months. And Box is actually available now. It's a horror network on YouTube.
Can you tell us a little bit about Fury in terms of what you're rolling? Do you have a big role in this?
Yeah, Fury is just a kick-ass old-school action thriller, man. It really relies heavily on action and fight. Old-school 80s, 90s throwback, just like sick, twisted villains and a lot of gunplay, a lot of fight. Really, really kick-ass flick. I play a character named the Ghost Killer.
Now, do you think that once all this stuff is virus thing that's die out and so forth, do you think that companies, including independent, will actually limit services to artists and not just companies' practices in order to get movies out there? Do you think it's going to be a little bit more difficult now after all this is done?
I think the theatrical releases are going to be looked at differently for sure. A lot of the movies, or the major studios even, actually released a bunch of films straight to VOD because of this bullshit we're dealing with now. So I think it's definitely going to be, the longer this goes, it could definitely be considered a serious option where, VOD might be just the norm now, I think, for a while. Hoping that's not the case, because there's a lot of projects that I'd love to see in a big screen. You know what I mean? I couldn't imagine seeing like an Alien or like a big space flick or a sci-fi. I watch a lot of those on the smaller screen, man. I mean, even if you got home theater, some movies are just made for the big screen.
It's going to be more devastating toward the artists themselves, not just the movie. The movie will eventually get out there, but as far as how do you think it's really going to affect you as an artist from the project? Is it going to hurt you money-wise even worse, or even get more work?
I think for me, it's like I feel the most for the producers and the directors. It's like even more the producers, I think, involved in the film, because of course they want that big theatrical release, and everybody wants that big opening weekend, and everybody wants it to make as much money as it can, and hopefully be as good as it can possibly be. It's like the actors and everybody like that. It's like it doesn't really affect them that much per se, because it's like film will get released, whether it's on demand or Netflix or type of thing. It's going to get seen and it's going to get out there. It doesn't necessarily help the producers and the directors, the people put the money into it that much. Everybody wants that big theatrical release, I guess. As far as the actors and everybody else involved in the project, it's kind of different. It's like we do the project and then we hope it's good and hope it gets a good release, and then we pretty much just move on to the next thing. A lot of the stuff that I do for myself personally is a lot of TV stuff anyway. I think I probably had more TV stuff released than films that are in the canon now getting ready to be released. So a lot of them are going to be doing Netflix and stuff like that anyway. I don't know, I guess it doesn't really affect me too much. If I had like a whole bunch of movies coming out that are set to do for theatrical release, I think it would affect me a lot more than, like, I know a lot of people who actually are in that situation, and it kind of sucks. But.
Now, how do you maintain to actually properly receive and actually get the resources that you need to progress going into other projects, even when companies are not even putting enough to help out the artists? How do you actually perceive that to get enough resources to where you can get by?
Box was actually an interesting story, because three of us, Lee, the director, and Brant, my DP, and me, we just finished a film that actually got picked up and had some more funding put into it, and they got involved with a major studio, which is, I think, due to be released soon. And, it was really cool, because it's like we accomplished the goal that we wanted, but there was a lot of trappings that come with that, too. There's a lot of stuff that you have to deal with when you're dealing with that was what inspired us to make Box anyway. Like, look, I'm moving to Georgia, Lee's moving to Thailand, and the DP was moving out of state, too. We're all kind of going our separate ways. And we're like, why don't we just get together and do one last kind of hurrah type of deal? It doesn't rely on heavy effects, and we could tell a hopefully visually enthralling story, and something that relies on a lot of our favorite genres, like a little bit of art house thrown in there, and thriller, and supernatural horror, character study, like it's just a character-driven piece. And we originally planned on having it be a feature. Time and money and everything kind of, once the reality rears its ugly head, we had kind of forced it down to its essentials and release it as a short, because I'm a big believer on it. I'd much rather have a really cool short film that tells the story as opposed to a drawn-out feature film just for the sake of having a feature. I mean, I've seen a lot of films where I was like, this movie went on about 20 minutes too long. We don't want to have that happen with Box.
That's when you're going to lose the audience. You can't simply lose the audience, and that's the important key. Don't lose your audience, regardless of if they're interested in this particular genre. Like with Box is not drawn out. Box is something like interpretation, and that's where it leads to everything. Then, as long as you keep the audience wondering to an extent, you're always going to have some kind of a good feedback one way or the other on that.
Yeah, and and like I mentioned earlier when we were talking, I was like, that's one of the things that we relied on. We trusted the audience, and if people going into it, if they're in the mood for like psychological kind of thriller, and if they're willing to pay attention, and hopefully it grabs them, they'll be rewarded. That everybody has their own interpretation on what really happened and what didn't happen, and it relies a lot on metaphors, and it plays with a lot of those thoughts and fears and emotions. And like I said, there's not a lot of dialogue in the film. It really gave me a chance to just basically kind of express more emotion, and it gave me a chance to do stuff that I'm usually not used to doing. I don't usually get cast that way.
How do you utilize character emotions more apparent to you and the audience and not be irrelevant on character judgment? How do you maintain that?
Getting your emotions across with dialogue, trying to dive into a character and try to emote and make it work. This was one of those situations where I had to really rely on reactions. And a lot of the times, obviously, this stuff's not really there. So, yeah, you hear those interviews all the time with actors. They're like, yeah, like if they do like a big budget green screen where everybody's looking at the finished product is like this big creature, but in reality, they're in a soundstage somewhere looking at a green tennis ball on a stick. It has to look and feel like you're in the middle of wherever and all hell is being unleashed. So there's a lot of shots like that where I was concerned it might be a little bit overboard, but hardly. I never watch my own stuff if I can help it. At the end of the day, once it's out there, you're open to whatever comes with it. It's art. And art could be looked over and mulled over and perceived many different ways. So,
especially for yourself, even you're mentally having, you got to have something mental to visualize as well. Not just because you have something physical. If you have both of them in the same room, then you can wander all you want of how you want to perceive the scene, how you want to perceive the character, to extend that emotion, to make it just by staring, let's say, at this box, for example, in the movie box. You go through all kinds of different ways of having to show the audience what could you perceive. Could you actually trick the audience? Could you actually make them believe that maybe this is a completely different illusion than what the audience thought to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, man, because it really opened up a can of worms for me in a way that a lot of times I've had people message me who've seen the film on demand, or I'll talk to people at conventions or film festival screening because it's on the circuit, the film festival circuit. And a lot of times I'll kind of poke my head in and kind of chat with people, and so you got 50, 100 people in a theater watching it, and you come out and you talk to people who are interested in it. You got 50 people, you get 50 different interpretations. It's really cool. And I've had people come up to me that message me, and they'll say stuff like, I was really going through some psychological problems in my past. I've dealt with some stuff, and I really, really like the way that it was portrayed in the film. They see it that way. It really is a psychological type thriller. And these are people who've gone through some serious trauma in their life, and to be able to watch a movie and they can find something in it that they can relate to, that's like the coolest fucking thing ever. That's better than money. That's better than anything, in my opinion. I mean, you touch somebody on a certain level. And me, I'm just acting. I'm just doing the best I can. But here's somebody who's dealt with that kind of trauma and letting stuff build up over the years mentally, and it really affected them. That's like really cool. I mean, I feel bad that they went through that. It's almost like the ultimate thank you.
Yeah, do you think that the fact is with this particular film especially can be a little bit therapeutic and a reflection of one's past or even current situation? Like you mentioned, that people have gone through some really bad stuff in their life, but when they see something like this, horror, something really terrifying that you think might actually trigger some past things, but actually helping them going through this, you think even though it's horrific, but going through something like this is something that they can help get through themselves in a different way just by watching this story.
Yeah, absolutely. And pretty much in a way, almost the entire piece, once you watch it from beginning to end, it's like it really, really is left open. It's one of those ultimate projects where you watch it and it's really, really left open. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no definitive ending. And a lot of times I think a lot of projects, we weren't big fans of that when we were making it. We're like, why don't we just go with the ambiguity? Leave it open. Let people decide, as opposed to telling anybody, no, this is how it is, and this is the definitive, this is what this really means, and how much of it is metaphor, and how much is literal, and how much is figurative, and all that stuff. Not even, a lot of times it's like you'll do stuff, you're not even thinking about stuff like that. People just come to you, and you get all these different stories and interpretations. It's really, really cool.
That's something that you definitely would have unknowingly did your job on, gave something, a perspective view to an audience member or an audience, because now they understand it their own way as the viewer. They understand it in their own way of how they see of their own world from seeing what you saw in your world.
Yeah, like I said, it's art. You put it out there and people get there. Like we were talking earlier about the song, the music. Favorite band puts a song out. You've been listening to that song since you were a kid, and then all of a sudden you flash forward 10, 20 years later, you think it means one thing, and it's a personal song to you. It means what it means to you. And then all of a sudden you'll hear the singer or the drummer or whatever in like an interview or a documentary explain what song is really about. It doesn't line up with what you feel it is, It's kind of like it's not yours anymore.
Do you think in some cases an artist can make more assumptions rather than choices in their acting ability, and actually more of asset than a project? Do you think that's part of the case, or do you think there could be other different ways of that?
Sometimes, yeah. I think a lot of times you get too much in your head. A lot of times I'll have people come to me and they go like, man, that was great. That was like The Shining, or that scene. Like, I get a lot of Pennywise the Clown, and I get a lot of Jack Torrance references. When I was doing that, I wasn't even thinking about any of that stuff. In my own head, I guess, doing my thing, and hit the audience with what we're going for, and you're like, oh shit, you like Saw or whatever. You go back and they show you things that happen, and you're like, oh man, that's great.
Do you think there's such thing as a maturing state? Do you think there's a maturing state from your time performance in One Night Fear all the way up to this film, a horror maturity phase, so you can be better at what you do on these characterizations?
One Night of Fear, that was really shot at 2013, 2014, whatever it was, and Fox a few years later, so it was released last year. So yeah, there's a good 4 or 5 year gap in between that. It also helped too that it was two completely different characters. One Night of Fear is just kind of like the everyday guy, the good guy. At no point in time do you feel that this guy has any ulterior motives or he's a bad guy by any means. But for some reason, whatever, since I've done that project, I've done a lot of bad guys, all that good stuff, and those are fun to play. But like I said, Box gave me a chance to turn it around. I was really pushing in that project. Really gave me a chance to do something completely different, and I probably wouldn't normally get cast as otherwise. Probably wouldn't be a sure bet, just say. If somebody was casting a role, they probably wouldn't have been like, oh, I don't know if he can do that. We like him as what he's doing now. And a lot of actors do that stuff in their group. But I'm always willing to try something different. I didn't get into it to be the villain or the hero or anything like that.
And the fact is that you've been playing quite a bit extensively in the horror genre. Do you think that doubt is still a bad card, continue to play in this while trying to go for other roles, no matter what type of horror character or characters you're playing as? Do you think doubt is becoming or less of an importance in an actor trying to get this?
I think it depends on who you're talking to as well. But they're also very wide. There's different genres, and there's people who come in. There's a lot of projects that are really, really good, and there's some really good performances, but they don't necessarily get the credit I think they deserve, because they just got that stigma. A lot of people are like, yeah, but that's a horror film, Yeah, it was some good stuff, but that's a slasher. Like, I've talked to Tony Todd multiple times at conventions and stuff over the years, and I always find myself commending him constantly on his performance in Savini's remake of Night of the Living Dead. He's a man. He's so powerful. I've seen some amazing performances in horror film. Action movies, too. It's another one. They don't always get the respect that they deserve, I think.
Go and plug in any websites or anything that we can check out right now, or anything else you care to share as well.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. I try to get on there as many times as I can. Real James D. That's my official Instagram page. You can check that out. Be sure to see what I do. Follow. I have a new project, The Fury, which I just found out, I guess, is getting released soon. I know they were trying to go for a theatrical release. Co-stars Lilo Brancato from Sopranos and Bronx Tale. Real kick-ass action flick. Check that out. Project I did called King's Gambit, I found out earlier too, is getting released next week. They're getting DVD, video on demand, all that good stuff. Just did a new show called Killer Couples, Season 2, which will be out pretty soon. Your Worst Nightmare. I did an episode of that, which was actually, it was cool. It was directed by Rob Schmidt. I got to work with him, director of the original Long Term. That was really cool. Really great guy. I got to work with him.
And there you have it, everybody. That is actor Jimmy Dempster.